The Siege of Yorktown was the culminating act of the Yorktown Campaign, a series of military operations occupying much of 1781 during the American Revolutionary War. The siege was a decisive Franco-American victory. After the surrender of British Lt. Gen. Charles Earl Cornwallis on October 17, the government of Lord North fell, and its replacement entered into peace negotiations that resulted in British recognition of American independence with the 1783 Treaty of Paris. The siege involved land forces from the United States, including the Continental Army and state militias, as well as land forces under French and British command. The British forces included a large number of troops from various German principalities of the Holy Roman Empire that were collectively known as Hessians. Since Yorktown, Virginia was specifically selected by Cornwallis for its properties as a deep-water port, both sides had naval support as well. The British forces included some Royal Navy vessels, and the Franco-American allies were supported by a large French fleet, some of whose Marines were landed to assist in siege operations. German historians have noted that approximately one-third of all the land forces involved were either hired or recruited from German states, or were German immigrants to America. This has led the siege to be known in German historiography as Die Deutsche Schlacht. The following units and commanders of the British, American, and French forces fought in the Siege of Yorktown, or provided significant local support. British Army. The British Army forces present at Yorktown arrived in Virginia in 4 separate detachments. The first was sent from New York City in December 1780 under the command of the turncoat Brigadier General Benedict Arnold. The second was sent from New York in March 1781 under the command of Brigadier General William Phillips to reinforce Arnold after a Franco-American threat. The third detachment to arrive was that of General Cornwallis, who had been active in the Carolinas, and decided, against standing orders, to join with the forces of Arnold and Phillips after the April Battle of Guilford Court House. He arrived at Petersburg, Virginia in late May to take command of the army. Phillips had died of a fever just a week before, and Arnold returned to New York not long after Cornwallis arrived. While at Petersburg, Cornwallis was joined by a 4th detachment from New York that was under the command of the Hessian Colonel August von Voigt. With this force, numbering about 7,200, Cornwallis first chased after the army of the Marquis de Lafayette, a much smaller force of Continental Army and local militiamen that had provided some resistance to the movements of Phillips and Arnold. Cornwallis was eventually ordered by the British Commander-in-Chief of North America, Lieutenant General Sir Henry Clinton, to establish a fortified deep-water port at either Yorktown or Portsmouth. Cornwallis chose Yorktown, and began constructing fortifications there and Gloucester Point, just across the York River from Yorktown. In August 1781, Commander Lt. Gen. Charles Earl Cornwallis, commanding headquarters, Staff 17th Light Dragoons Marines Artillery Royal Regiment of Artillery 2nd Battalion 82nd Foot 1st Brigade Lt. Col. John York, 22nd Foot 17th Foot 23rd Foot 33rd Foot 71st Foot 2nd Battalion 2nd Brigade Lt. Col. Thomas Dundas, 80th Foot 43rd Foot 76th Foot 80th Foot German Infantry Ansbach Bayreuth Contingent Col. August von Voigt 1st Regiment 2nd Regiment Artillery Company Hesse-Kassel Contingent Lt. Col. Matthew von Fuchs Prinz Regiment von Bose Regiment Jaeger Company Artillery Company Loyalists Queen's Rangers British Legion North Carolina Volunteers Detachments Pioneers American Army. The American forces that opposed Cornwallis at Yorktown also arrived in Virginia at different times, since most of the detachments were made in reaction to the British movements. After Arnold was sent to Virginia, Major General George Washington, the American commander-in-chief, in January 1781 sent the Marquis de Lafayette to Virginia with 900 men. He was to be followed promptly by troops from the Pennsylvania line under the command of Brigadier General Anthony Wayne. But Wayne did not arrive in Virginia until June. Lafayette's force included a substantial number of Virginia militia, and he shadowed Cornwallis during the movements that ended at Yorktown, with a skirmish at Spencer's Ordinary and a larger battle at Green Spring being their only significant encounters. The main Continental Army of General Washington was at first stationed outside New York City, which Washington hoped to besiege with the assistance of the French army. However, word from Admiral Paul de Grasse of the French West Indies fleet would sail north to assist in operations on the Chesapeake Bay convinced Washington that action was best taken against Cornwallis's army in Virginia. Accordingly, the American and French armies set out in mid-August for Virginia. Some troops went overland the entire way, others were transported on the Chesapeake by ships of the French Navy. Washington arrived in Lafayette's camp before Yorktown on September 17. Commander General George Washington, commanding headquarters 4th Continental Light Dragoons Armand's Legion, Colonel Charles Armand Tuffin, Marquis de la Rue Erie Artillery Brigadier General Henry Knox 1st Continental Artillery Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Carrington, Captain Whitehead Coleman 2nd Continental Artillery Regiment, Colonel John Lamb 4th Continental Artillery Regiment, Captains Patrick Duffy, William Ferguson, and James Smith Sappers and Miners Infantry Light Division Major General Marquis de Lafayette 1st Brigade Brigadier General Peter Muhlenberg Colonel Joseph Voss's Battalion Lieutenant Colonel John Joseph Sauber de Guillemot's Battalion Lieutenant Colonel Francis Barber's Battalion 2nd Brigade Brigadier General Moses Hazen Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Scammell's Battalion Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton's Battalion Hazen's Canadian Regiment Lieutenant Colonel Edward Antill 2nd Division Major General Benjamin Lincoln 1st Brigade Brigadier General James Clinton 1st New York Regiment, Colonel Goose Van Schaik 2nd New York Regiment, Colonel Philip Van Cortlandt 2nd Brigade, Colonel Elias Dayton 1st New Jersey Regiment and 2nd New Jersey Regiment, Colonel Matthias Ogden Rhode Island Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Jeremiah Olney 3rd Division Major General Baron von Steuben 1st Brigade Brigadier General Anthony Wayne 1st Pennsylvania Battalion, Colonel Walter Stewart 2nd Pennsylvania Battalion, Colonel Richard Butler 2nd Brigade Brigadier General Mordecai Gist 3rd Maryland Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Adams 4th Maryland Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Roxburgh Virginia Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Gaskins Virginia Militia, General Thomas Nelson 1st Brigade Brigadier General George Whedon 2nd Brigade Brigadier General Robert Lawson 3rd Brigade Brigadier General Edward Stevens Dabney's State Legion, Charles Dabney French Army. The French forces at Yorktown came from two separate sources. The larger force, under the command of Lieutenant General the Comte de Rochambeau, landed at Newport, Rhode Island in 1780, and marched overland to join Washington's army outside New York in the summer of 1781. These troops marched with Washington's army from New York to Yorktown. More of the French troops were transported by boat on the Chesapeake than Americans, due to the French fleet commanders' preferences for transporting their own. The second source for French troops was the Caribbean colony of Saint-Domingue, where Admiral de Grasse picked up more than 3,000 troops under the command of Major General the Marquis de Street Simon before departing for North America. The land forces were also supplemented by a number of Marines provided by de Grasse in support of the siege. Commander Lt. Gen. Comte de Rochambeau, commanding artillery Lt. Col. Comte de Beauville Auxon Regiment Metz Regiment Infantry Marge. Gen. Baron de Villamenel's Division Brigade Bourbon-École, Marquis de Laval Bourbon Regiment Royal de Ponce Regiment Marge, Gen. Vicomte de Villamenel's Division Brigade Soissonnois-École, Marquis de Street, Mamie Soissonnois Regiment Saint-Onge Regiment Marge, Gen. Marquis de Street, Simon's Division Brigade Agennois-École, Marquis de Roudechamp Agennois Regiment Gatinois Regiment Brigade Touraine-École, Vicomte de Pont de Touraine Regiment Detachment at Gloucester Brig, Gen. Marquis de Choisy Marines Lauzun's Legion Source, Morrissey, Brendan, Yorktown 1781. The World Turned Upside Down, Oxford, United Kingdom, Osprey Military.